31 Circuit Court, or Supreme Court, 349, wherein the Supreme Court said, and pay attention to this because this is very important, because this is where many of you are even presently in collateral damage and may not be aware of it, etc. Quote unquote, the tax under consideration may be described as an excise upon the particular privilege of doing business in a corporate capacity, i.e., with the advantages which arise from corporate or quasi-corporate organization. And requirement to pay such taxes involves the exercise of privileges, unquote. Now, put that in perspective, and then you understand why when the political operatives of the coup d'etat of 1861 and their corporate successors will always communicate with the general people of the land in mail with all capital letters, because they're declaring you a corporate ward. Keep that in mind. So when you look at mail coming to you in any form, in any so-called tax form or any alleged coupon, quote unquote, which they don't tell you, bill, coupon, bill, it will be in all capital letters. I'm showing you why it's done, so that you can make your decisions and take your responsibility to stop consenting to being misrepresented as a corporation that is under the wardship of their bottomry instruments of the Circle Church and Chancery, registered or operative in at Fleet Street, England, etc. So therefore, all legislation concerning taxation, etc., by the people not knowing the collateral damage operations, are not aware that those decisions are made in England. They're made in England for the corporate operations of the United States Corporation Company, which has been misrepresented by the politicians as the country which it was not and is not. And it's defunct. That must be made aware to you. You must be made aware of that. Now, so the reader is strongly and wisely advised to thoroughly research and study the etymology and the definitions of the following words and phrases, and use a good law dictionary and an unabridged dictionary, a thesaurus, and be sure to take notes. I'm going to give you 19 words just for starters. Review this if you have to. Go over this so that you can start repairing, because we're going to need a lot of healing. Because I'm telling you right now, a lot of things are going to be coming out in these coming months that are going to verify all these things we've been telling you all for years. However, the interest of why we're dealing with this collateral damage tonight is because many of these people who are criminals, who have been pretending to be government, are on a missionary operations of injuring the people rather than to be, as you might say, found out for who they really are. And that includes the priesthood who've been working with them too. People who you've trusted that in many, and it's not just one, all the so-called religious organizations who have been living wealthy at the expense of the widow's pennies or at the poor, when you find out their real connections to these people who you thought were government, and that you thought these people were so-called godly, and you find out that they really were partners, they're desperately trying to keep the public from really finding this out. However, all this information is coming out anyway. However, our interest is that the masses of the people have limited injury by these people who are intentionally injuring them and willing to sacrifice them as collateral damage to protect their own criminality, also their own exposure. So keep these words, just these 19 words, write them down and research them so you can have a good comprehension of what we're discussing at this particular cycle of time. 1, excise. Excise, that's E-X-C-I-S-E. 2, taxes. 3, corporation. 4, capacity. 5, requirement. 6, privilege. 7, rights. 8, constitution. 9, person. 10, personality. 11, unalienable and inalienable. Those words are relative. Unalienable and inalienable. 12, jurisdiction. 13, pecuniary wages. That's very important in this subject at this moment. Pecuniary wages. 14, in propria persona. 15, fraud. 16, unconscionable. 17, artifice. 18, de facto. 19, de jure. Keep those in mind, and they will lead you to other law and legal terms that would be very important to you to reduce the collateral damage to yourselves and to your families. Now, I want to continue and deal with the misrepresentation of the 16th Amendment for the excise tax, coming from the excise tax, and the misrepresentation of natural people as corporate entities in order to impose a tax under de facto or color rule, color of office, and color of authority that has been the basis of the economic stock market since 1913 era, operating with a de facto and already dissolved corporate entity known as the United States of America Corporation, and has been operating since then, and has in fact been bankrupted again twice since then. Most of you already know this, but what they've put it this way: they not only put insult on injury, they put injury on insult on injury, and the people have not caught on yet. Now that things are collapsing literally around them, many people do not understand that they're being sacrificed politically and economically, and they also want to, they will say reduce the population rather than say genocide the people out. All right? In other words, they're willing to kill the people to cover up their own criminality. So Amendment 16 of 1913. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on income. Now keep in mind, this is the excise tax. From whatever source derived without apportionment, which is already unconstitutional, among the several states and without regard to any census or enumeration. Now, the history of the enactment and subsequent ratification of the 16th Amendment discloses beyond a doubt that the intent and the purpose of the 16th Amendment was to tax income derived from government-granted privileges, and particularly from corporate activities and the profits arising from the quote-unquote sale of commodities and the profits arising from those sale of commodities and the capital assets. So let's write this down so that you can stay very clear and keep up where we're going with this. The income tax is specifically and only addressing corporate activities of the sale of commodities and other capital assets. Fact. The 16th Amendment and the corporate activities, operations, and the sales of commodities activities and the taxing relative to that did not expand the taxing authority that already constitutionally exists, not whatsoever. It only clarified the arguments and the limitations of such taxation. And for those of you who want to do some research, I'll give you another case that you can look up. It will be Pollock, that's Pollock, versus Farmers Loan and Trust Company. 157 U.S. 429, 158 U.S. 601, that's 1895. And the Supreme Court has declared the Federal Income Tax Act of 1894 unconstitutional for want of apportionment, because income, quote unquote, and property, quote unquote, parenthesized capital, were indistinguishable, and an excise tax cannot burden property for want of due process. Repeat. Supreme Court for the United States, 1894 and 1895, declared the Federal Income Tax Act of 1894 unconstitutional for want of apportionment, and an excise tax cannot burden property for want of due process. And later, in the Speckles Sugar Refrigeration Company versus McLean, 192 U.S. 397 1004, the Supreme Court declared and ruled and affirmed that the Congress for the United States has the delegated power to tax, quote unquote, income arising from the government granted privileges of incorporation. This is why they have fraudulently been misrepresenting and committing estate and grammatical violations against the people by writing their names and appellations in all capital letters to misclassify them as corporations under their defunct corporation, and thus being able to liquefy or make fungible their estates for their own purposes, being that they, the people, are declared foreign corporate entities without their consent, without their knowledge, and by virtue of misrepresentation, which is why they do the all capital letters when they send instruments to your homes, etc., through the mail, which is also mail fraud. Now, having this defeat, suffered defeat, this is the de facto Congress. Having suffered defeat in the Pollock case, the Congress was apparently aware of, but pretended to be unaware that it could tax corporate profits, or they may have, because of other political compromises and considerations, chosen to feign an oversight of their limited delegated taxing authority. And so public officials know that a profit on investment or on a return above principal expenditures, quote unquote, constitutes an income. And the labors, listen to this carefully, the labors and the pecuniary compensations of the common worker and common citizen is not income. I'm repeating, this is the rule. Public officials know that a profit on investment or return above quote unquote principal expenditures constitutes an income. And even then, as you can see, it's limited. However, the labors and the pecuniary compensations of the common worker and citizen is not income, is not income, is not income. The right to work is not a privilege. Supreme Court ruling. The foregoing can be verified from the pages of the Congressional Record of the Senate of 1909 as follows. June the 16th, 1909, S3344. June the 17th, 1909, S3377. June 28, 1909, S3900. June 29, 1909, S3935 and S3936. June the 30th, 1909, S3976. July 2nd, 1909, S4043. And during the debates which ensued, the Senate frequently adverted to the Speckles sugar case, Supra, as a standard upon which to pattern the 16th Amendment. And consequently, the 16th Amendment, SJ Resolution 40, and a Corporation Excise Tax Act, HR 1438, 36 Statute 112, was introduced on June the 28th to 29th of 1909. And so the express purpose of the 16th Amendment was to avert once and for all the issue presented in the Pollock versus Farmer Loan and Trust Company Supra, i.e. under the 16th Amendment, income and property capital were not and are not synonymous. See why they miseducate you? And see the collateral damage that has been done to targeted communities over generations where local and state and federal persons claiming to be legitimate government have actually robbed the people for their own personal gain since 1913 and far beyond that since 1871, and they have built massive wealth on it and then used that very wealth against the people while claiming to be government when in fact they are color of office, color of authority, and legislating under a color of law. And all the miseries that you all are running into right now is the collateral damage of that great fraud and lie that continues to this very day. And it's been done maliciously. It's been done knowingly. It's been done with local and state politicians well aware of it. Now you understand why they have been running campaigns in the numbers of millions and millions and quadrillion millions of dollars for jobs that compensate only a couple of a couple of 100,000, and why within a short period all of them are wealthy, and you wonder why your communities are targeted. And then you have poor people, you have homeless people all over the place, you have women struggling with children because the de facto magistrates who've been pretending to be constitutional judges who are not actually have stock in private prisons under silent weapons for quiet wars, and they have been deliberately, and it's in their own documents, breaking up your families and running the men out of the homes for the purpose of human trafficking. So now it makes it available for the women and the children to be vulnerable to corporate state operations, and under the guise of human services, they've been stealing people's children.
They've been trafficking.
That's exactly what they've been doing, and that's a fact. Now, many of you always knew this, and many of you are in denial. However, the consequence of these things having gone unaddressed are now destroying societies. And you, me, and we all have been collateral damage. However, one of the problems that is greatly damaging to people is that many people trying to be in their minds what they thought was, quote unquote, although that's still improper, good citizens, were paying taxes to destroy their own families and being poor in the process. Collateral damage. That's what it is. Now, also, let me go a little further so that you can understand this is not opinion. This is their own documentation. This is congressional records. This Supreme Court cases. This is executive orders. And you see some of these politicians writing all kinds of executive orders now, and these people are still unaware of what executive orders are. They don't even know that they're not even constitutional. However, let us go on, because this is to try to help the people. But you must help yourself, starting with stop consenting. Hold on. What is income within the meaning of the law of the 16th Amendment of the Constitution? Now, in relation, and I have a lot of other law cases here to support. The decision relative to the Supreme Court is noteworthy since the court reviewed and relied upon most of the foregoing case laws and citations presented before arriving at its conclusion. As an example, again, in the Goodrich versus Edwards case, 225 U.S. 527, that's 1921, the Supreme Court defines income as follows. The Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, they were de facto, but still, the definition of quote unquote income approved by this court is, quote unquote, pay attention to this, you all, the gain derived from capital, from labor, or from both combined, provided it be understood to include profits gained through sale or conversion of capital assets. That's the Eisner versus McCumber case, 252 U.S. 189, 207, 441 Supreme Court at 391. Now, the gain derived from quote unquote labor contemplated in this Goodrich case, however, supra, and in previous and subsequent cases where the phrase is used means the actual gain or profit derived from contracting the services of laborers or employees. And this refers to gains acquired above and beyond the principal investment. Above and beyond the principal investment. Moreover, the pecuniary, and this is important, pecuniary wage, that's P-E-C-U-N-I-A-R-Y, that's pecuniary. Get very clear on what this is. That's why they don't teach you civics. So the pecuniary wage considerations or compensations which, quote unquote, natural persons derive from salaries, employments, wages, and occupations are not, they are not income. They are distinct from and not included in the aforementioned definition of income. There we go. That's the law. Law is. That's the law is. You want to know why your families are poor? You want to know why they're poisoning you? Do you know that the U.S. corporation went bankrupt again in 2019, and that they've been operating unlawful, and that's the real reason why all of this other confusion all of a sudden arise up to cover up the fact that they went bankrupt, and that the federal employees retirement fund was the last large financial holdings under the United States corporation. It's gone. So all of a sudden you got this all this stuff going on, everybody getting sick, and everybody got to wear 1 mask, 2 masks, 3 masks, 4 masks, 5 masks, 6 masks, when they know that viruses are 10,000 times smaller than the fibers of these masks. Just as an example for people who keep consenting to what they know is a fraud, and you know is a fraud. But if you're willing to sacrifice your family members and your children to these people, then keep in mind you're consenting. And don't blame some mystical devil, because there ain't no mystical devil done nothing to you. You've consented to these evil people who are actual demons who have missionaries in your communities who knowingly take oaths to the popes of Rome and pull you into the pits of hell and ignorance. And they call it a pulpit. They don't even hide it. And you pretend that your miseries is coming from some mystical devil, when the pits of hell is actually the executor's chambers that's operated from England beneath all the churches. That means these places that you thought were holy places of worship have executor's chambers beneath them to punish people who haven't been paying these excise taxes to these fake government operatives who've been pretending to be government, who are actually warring against the people. That's why they call it silent weapons. And that's only an aspect of it. Now, that's a fact. Now, for those of you, because you know we have a lot of people who've always known this information, they won't teach it because it doesn't make finance for them. And then you have others who always claim to love the people, but you'll see them, they'll never put their necks out on a line to get out here to help the people. They will be on armchairs and talk through other people to criticize the people who are really doing the work. But they have a lot of titles, though. And they've been doing this stuff for years. But you don't never see them, do you? And they don't produce literature, do they, to help the people? But they got a lot of things to say about the people who are doing the work, don't they? They're called armchair authorities. That's kind of a de facto position, too. It's another reason why we're showing you some of their own documentation. Now, this is their opinions of you coming from the cottonwigs of the Whiggamore Party that you know best as called the Democratic Party. And that is not supporting the Republican Party either, just because I'm telling you this history, because this is the truth. This is their position with you. For the persons who call themselves Democrats, this is their papers on how they deal with you. And this is what their opinions are of you.